All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we have a lot of people able to get logged on here. So hello again, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Megan Mediola, and I am a Regional Marketing Coordinator here at JMT Consulting. Today, we're very excited to have our very own Mark Brazier here with us to lead us in today's webinar over nonprofit grants tracking and billing made easy with Sage Intacct. I want to share just a couple of housekeeping notes before I turn it over to Mark. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please go ahead and submit those into the Q&A section on your control panel. We'll go ahead and save all of those until the end of the presentation, but don't hesitate to go ahead and submit them as you think of them, and we will get to all of those questions at the end of the webinar. Also, just a quick reminder that we will send you both the slides and recording of today's webinar within 24 hours after its conclusion. And now I want to introduce Mark Brazier to you all. Mark lives in Oklahoma City and is our Intacct sales engineer here at JMT. Before coming to work with us at JMT, he actually was a CFO himself for a small private college in Oklahoma. He and his team implemented Intacct into their own organization while he was there, so he really knows about Intacct from an end-user perspective, and will share that all with you today. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Mark, to get us started.
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll share my screen and we'll get started. I know your time is busy, and so I will work through these pieces hopefully at a pace that you can follow, but not too slow, and so we don't waste our time. Let me just say a few things about Intacct and JMT before we begin. Intacct accounting software is what we consider best-in-class software for accounting. JMT is a consulting firm, and we do sell Intacct, Sage Intacct accounting software, but we do not publish the software. We deliver it to you and help you set it up and educate you and train you and those pieces of the puzzle. What we have done is we've gone out and found what we think is one of the best software available, and as well as other pieces that can integrate with it. So some things about Intacct that you might need to know if you do not know already is the fact is its ability to integrate, whether it be for financial planning and analysis, whether it be human resources, payroll, mobile employee expenses and time tracking, automated invoices, payment processes, et cetera, whatever area of your back office that you may be dealing with, Intacct will integrate with it. JMT partners with a number of those. We can refer you to some additional software that integrates, but if you have your particular software solutions in other areas besides the accounting that you want to integrate with Intacct, JMT can make that happen. It can be either done through a direct integration or through an import-export, which is a fairly simple process. Another thing about Intacct that we like to point out is its automation, the workflows, the automated processes. You'll get some glimpse of those today. The idea is to make it more efficient, more on-time strategy. Our intent is for as much as possible, if not all of your processes, to be done within the software. All of us as CFOs or accountants or business office staff have spent hours and hours and hours using Excel, which we all enjoy and we all appreciate what Excel can do. But the goal is for Intacct to do as much as that as possible for you. And that's some of what you'll be able to see in the reporting today. And then lastly, the piece about Intacct that I want to share with you is its ability to provide visibility. And you're seeing that right now in the dashboard. Visibility with real-time reports, a magnifying glass to interrogate the data, to go right into it. And so let's jump into this and look at first at this particular dashboard. And I know you didn't come to this particular webinar for dashboards, but we'll begin with the end in mind, and that is reporting and visibility. As you can see from this dashboard, you can see that this particular one is set up for grant management. The dashboards in Intacct are totally customizable. You can set those up however you'd like to have them. You can set those up for multiple individuals. As you can see in this particular example, I have dashboards set up for accounts payable, the CEO, the CFO, grant management, even prepaid expense has its own dashboard. And so you can have multiple dashboards if you have multiple areas that you want to look at and you do not want them on one dashboard, and you can have multiple dashboards for different staff members, whether it be the CEO and anybody else in administration, all the way down to AP or whoever it might be. And so the dashboards are customizable for you. To get an idea of some of the things that dashboards can do, you see here at the top what we call performance cards. And these performance cards can measure, these particular performance cards are all financial. One thing, just as an aside, about Intacct is that Intacct also handles statistical data. And it handles statistical data just like it does in your general ledger, and your chart of accounts handles financial data. And so you could have, these are financial, but you can also, and I left those there because of this being a grant seminar, but it also could handle ratios between your financial and your statistical data. And so it's quite helpful in that. Then in addition, you can see reports. Any report that is created in the system are available to you to put in your dashboard. As you look at the dashboards, you can see all these blue areas, and I'll get more into this later, but in these blue areas, any of those areas can drill down, and directly from the dashboard, you can drill down into the report and see detail all the way to the transaction level. And so if the grant manager has their own dashboard and they want to see what the accounting office has posted to their particular grant, they can do that. They can drill down straight from here. You can see here are the transactions themselves, and all the way down to the transaction level. There's the actual transaction, the journal entry that was created for that. And so all the way from the dashboard, this issue of visibility is very important. So you have reports, you have performance cards, you also have graphs. You can see the graphs here. There are some additional things. There are links, there are records, variety of things, but the dashboard is quite helpful. And as you are looking at software to propose and suggest to possibly your CEO or to your board, this idea of a dashboard being able to be set up for them where they can see what they need to see at a glimpse without having to know accounting, without having to know how to run the software itself, they can see what they need to see. One final thing about the dashboard before I leave it is this area right up here. As you can see, this is set to 12/31/2018. We're working with demo data today, and so therefore I have the date set to there. Typically, you would have that set to the default, which the default would be today. That would be where most of you would have that, and it would default to that. And so each day you'd have new data. Not only would you have new data each day, but the reports would change as entries are created by other staff members or by yourself on other points and other modules within the software. Then these other filters, you can see here, you can see this is a customer filter, this is a grant filter. There you can use any of the dimensions that are in the software that you've created. And that's a whole nother webinar on the customization of the dimensions in their chart of accounts. But you can filter those, and you can filter those back and forth. So you could go here and pull a particular grant up, and it would show just that. Or you can go back to all customers. And so the dashboard is a very important piece of the puzzle. It is the end, but it is the thing that board members, CEOs, CFOs, a variety of people need access to as they try to monitor day to day and make the best decisions. One of the things I'll point out, and I'll probably mention this again before it's over, but one of the things that we want to do, and this goes back to my comment about Excel, and that is your value to your organization isn't that you can run an Excel sheet. Your value to your organization, or that you can dig up information or you can manipulate data, but your value is your ability to analyze and project and help them make financial decisions, and for you to make the financial decisions you make. And so the ability to have real-time visible data is very, very important, as you know, for making those decisions. So let's dive into grants. You can see here I have a couple of grants. I have a grants P&L where I have the grants listed down the left side, where typically you would see general ledger accounts. And then across the top, you have a variety of things here. We have change in net assets, month to date, et cetera, restricted and unrestricted, and so on and so forth. Down here, I have a specific, and I'll get back to this report again in another, in the report module, but here is just the Hartwell grant, and we've got with donor restrictions, without donor restrictions, year ending, all the GL accounts, and down the left side. And again, the reason these particular ones are expandable is because they have sub accounts underneath them. And so we get into and that's the reason these are not blue and are not drilled down, is because you have multiples. And so when you drill down there, you could drill in there. And we'll look at that in the report module when we get there. So let's go into the project and grant module. And let's look at some of the things that the module itself can do. First of all, as you see here, here's a list of grants that are in this particular system. And so as you can see, they are listed, but they also have the ability to have a hierarchy. So this health initiative is a good shot to take a look at this particular one. Here we have a grant called Health Initiative 1. And then we have multiple years of it. And so you can have multiple years as some are active and some are become inactive. Also here's one where we have the Claremont Impact Study, and we have 2 different contracts or grants underneath it. And so this gives you ability. You can see the particular grant, you can see whether it's the parent or the child in the hierarchy. You can see whether it's active or not, whether it's being, in this particular one, it's being applied for, where it is in that process. You can see the manager, the customer that's listed for that if you're invoicing them, and we will get back to that. That would particularly be the grant itself. And then you can see the employee number of the person that is the manager for that. And so there's a wealth of information just in the summary of the particular projects and grants that you have. So let's look at a specific grant here for a moment. Let's look at this Holcomb grant. As we dive into it, you can see the information that is available to you and the information that you can put in this particular, in a grant. The basic information, you get an ID, you create the name, you create a customer. Of course, as you know, you create the customer so that you can invoice them. You can put the beginning and ending dates there. You can put whether it's active or inactive, and that's kind of, it seems confusing on the surface, but this status is active and inactive in the sense that it's available to you or it's not available to you at all. But this particular status here is you can customize this and set up the process for where you are. And so maybe it's completed, but you're still dealing with, maybe the dates have completed, but you're still dealing with some expenses and you're still closing it out. It may be in the complete status, but it's still active, and so it's available to you. The people involved in your particular grant, here's the grant manager, we talked about that, any sales contact, business rules, what we should use, those sort of things. Additional information that you allows you to show progress, show revenue restriction on this, how it's restricted, the main contacts for this particular grant, the billing terms, set up net 30, net 10, whatever you'd like to do there, billable employee expenses, billable AP, whether you can do that or not, and I'll show you how to do that just at a click. What department that this is out of, if it's specified to a particular department, particular entity or location, and a particular restriction. Any sales order numbers, purchase order numbers, etc., things that are available to you. Any attachments that you do, maybe it's the actual grant, and I'll show you how to do attachments later on, but it's just a click and drag. Maybe it's a particular grant application or something that you want to attach to this so everything is together. And then this final box here at the bottom is a totally customizable box. So we're going to look at more information, but if you can't find it anywhere else, you have the ability to put it in a customizable box at the bottom of the information that you might need. I'm going to point out this one feature within Intacct, which applies not just to grants, but applies to anything that you might do in Intacct, and that is called the Collaborator. The Collaborator has a kind of a Facebook type process to it, but it is set up, and you're going to see it in other, and I'll try to point it out, but you'll see it in some other windows later on. And that is if there is a question or a comment that needs to be posted about a particular item, it could be a transaction, it could be a journal entry, it could be employees' expenses, whatever it might be, you can put that right here. And not only can you put that there, but you can also send a note to somebody through that. So for example, if I want to send a note to myself, it's going to pull me up and allow me to, or allow, maybe I'm sent to employee, mark the employee Brazier, send that to them. It'll post that on there, and then it's going to pop up in their particular field, and there's the collaborator itself, and leave a message. But the most important, so you can dialogue back and forth. You can also attach files to it. You can attach links to it. And maybe the most important piece of this, it stays in the window that you've put it in. And so as conversation continues here, you may develop a conversation that allows you to remember what you discussed and remember what decisions were made. And it stays with that window, whether it be this grant or whether it be a transaction or whatever it might be. Resources and pricing. Here are the resources, employees, other resources that you might have. You can set the billing rate. So later on when we do billing and we have staff time, it will automatically be billed. You can add the overhead if you'd like to on that as well. Project or grant summary. You can see now these are the different grants down the side, so you're not seeing the entities. And so this particular one is obviously tied to just a couple of these entities, and so you don't see much else outside of that, but it's a summary of those particular of your expenses there, of your finances. The ability to do billing, how you want to do billing, and then finally task. If you've got if you want to create a task, it is not exhaustive as far as the task plan, the project plan for a grant, but it does give you some control of that, and allows you to, particularly for staff time, to know, okay, what phase were we in and where were we in this process, and so we know what we're billing for. So that gives you an idea of some of the information that is available to you in the just information itself. So let's go further and let's look at the time and expenses.
Hi, Mark.
Yes.
I've been getting a couple of chats in that the screen looks pretty small. Is there any way to enlarge the screen for what you see on there?
I don't know why I'm not.
If not, that's okay. I just didn't know if there was an easy way to zoom in, but no worries. For everyone, if you're having trouble seeing something on there on the recording that we send out, you should be able to zoom in on there. So our apologies for that, but you should be able to zoom in on the recording. So that is totally fine, Mark.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and keep going.
All right. So let's look at time and expenses. And I'll try to slow down since we're having a little trouble maybe seeing that. So time and expenses within the system, and this can be used for anything, but as it relates particularly to grants, this is an important piece. And so you have employees that are clocking time on work they're doing for a particular grant, or they're clocking expenses. And so the end goal of this thing is to be able, obviously, to account to that grant where you're spending that money, or where you're going to request funds from the awarded grant to cover those. And so this is the building blocks for those. And we're going to go through time and expenses, other billable charges, and then finally we'll look at how the system automatically can create an invoice for you so you can see that. So here's time and expenses. So first let's start with just expenses. So here's staff expenses. Here's a list of different ones. And we can see Ms. Daines here has a number of expenses that they have logged. Now these have been logged directly into Intacct. There are other options, and you may have other software where you can do this mobile. Intacct can integrate with a number of those. We can talk to you about that. Some we could recommend, so while staff are out in the field, they're able to see that. And so as you look here, you can see you have the employee's name, you have the various pieces of the puzzle. And in this particular case, this particular staff member is working under one grant, but you could have multiple grants in here, and then it's going to separate those as needed. I mentioned a moment ago the ability to just click and drag. And so in this particular case, we have some attachments in this expense report. And notice what it does. Notice how it pulls up. In this particular case, I have two different invoices. And so it pulls up both of them. And there's the actual invoice. And so those are just right there and available. And so they can be attached to the expense record itself. Notice they just put the information in. You have the ability to do whether it is a credit card, a corporate card, or whether it's personal. And so therefore, since in this case it's a corporate card, it's non-reimbursable. When I entered this as cash, immediately it defaulted to leaving that blank because it would be reimbursable. So you have the reimbursable, non-reimbursable, have the information, have the dates. And then over here, this small checkbox is whether or not it's billable. And we'll show this at the end, but it's billable back to Holcomb Grant. And the system will be able to automatically create the invoice for that. So that is staff expenses. And in staff expenses, something I'll show to you here is that you have the ability to have an approval set up for expenses and for timesheets. And so if you would like to create that, again, Intacct does a wonderful job of giving you many, many options, and then you're able to minimize them and use a more streamlined system, or if you need the approvals in place, you have the ability to enter those approvals as well. So you can also, if you notice here, you have staff expenses and my expenses, so another staff member can enter them for them, or they can enter them themselves. So let's look at staff timesheets. Go back to this individual again, same time frame. And we see they have their different, again, we're doing Holcomb Grant. It's staff time, what department it was, the entity, and then how many hours on the particular days. You had a begin date, you had an end date for this particular posting. And so that shows you all the pieces of the puzzle there that you need. And then finally, concerning items that may be billed, you have bills. So let's say you're purchasing items for the grant. So we're going to pull down and look at this particular one right here. And this is just a standard bill that you would enter. Notice here again the ability, and let me pull this up in payables. You have the ability to set up approvals for bills, and you have the ability to set up approvals for payments. You can have multiple required approvals if you'd want to in those areas as well. So that's customizable. You can set it how you need to do that. So we're not going to cover the AP side of this except to show the bill itself today. Again, you have the ability to do attachments. Again, you have the collaborator at the bottom. I didn't point that out earlier, but there it is on a bill. And again, you have the issue of being billable. Now I have across here, Intacct uses what they call dimensions, some call segments in their chart of accounts. Here, the particular ones that are shown here are entity, department, restriction, project, or grant. But you also have the ability, number one, if you'd like, to change your layout. So if you need to add more, or you do not need all of these, that works as well. And even if you do not have them on a regular basis, you have the ability to enter other dimensions down here at the bottom. And so you can access all the dimensions right from there. But obviously the way to do this would be the ones that you would use most frequently, or you would use it all, you could create in the layout itself so that they would be easily accessible. Something else I don't know if I pointed out a moment ago, but if you have a particular grant and it's tied to a particular GL or tied to another particular dimension, whether it be department or whatever it might be, it would automatically default to that to cut down on mistakes and increase efficiency. So you created the bill. You have the ability to approve the bill. You have the ability to approve payments when you're paying that. That's on the AP side of things. But let's go back to the project module and look at invoices. So we've created timesheets, we've created expenses from your staff members that are out in the field, and we've created some billable charges. Then we go to generate invoices. And it's just a simple process. We're going to pull this up. We're going to say this is a project, not a customer. We're going to go down to Holcomb Grant. We're going to choose which grant we want, and we're going to preview the expenses. It gives you all the information, the invoice date, customer, etc. If you have a particular contact, it will show up there, ship to contact, and then it's going to pull in. Here's your billable time, your timesheets with the wages that we had set up from the very beginning with this particular employee, employee's name, department, entity, the various pieces of the puzzle, total amount there. Employee expenses while they were traveling for this particular grant, and the account payable expenses, that the bill that we registered. And so all those are together. I'm not going to go the next step simply because it's so customizable, but you have the ability from here to create the invoice. And when you create the invoice and get ready to print or email it, then you have the ability to customize that invoice to fit your particular organization. All right, now, so we've done the process through gathering expenses for the grant. We've done the process of expenses, time, and billable, and then showing how we create the invoice. Now let's go and look at some reports for just a moment. And I want to look at this report that we had looked at on the dashboard, this Hartwell income statement. And I know that this is small, and I'll put it on the print level here in a moment so you can see it a little better, but I want to look at this level. What you have here is restricted budget, restricted actual, how much is remaining. So here's your donor restriction information. Here's without donor restriction, and here's the year ending. Now you can collapse any of these, and I'll do that for you in just a moment. You also have the ability to drill down in each of these areas. First of all, you can do it from the report setup, where you have the triangles. In this particular case, the grant revenue is open, but then the sub accounts within that are not open. So there it is, or contributions. There it is, the additional ones. And same thing down the expenses. So if you notice, as I open these up, these black numbers began to turn blue. And so you began to see why they're blue, and that is because you can drill down each one of those. And again, you can drill all the way to the transaction level. And again, we've got the collaborator setting there, and the question here was asked to Mark employee appraiser, is this hotel charge correct? And they replied back, it's correct. And so you make sure that you every piece of the puzzle, and this stays with it. Notice this particular was done on July 28th, and so it stays with it. And so if it's ever raised again, we can go back, say, yeah, we've already checked that out. It is the way it's supposed to be. So looking for just a few minutes at the reports themselves, and I know you came mainly for grants, but as you can see here, the reports, there's almost an unlimited number of ways that you can customize these. As you can see here, and we go back to report, we had with donor restrictions, we had budget and we had actual. Here we have the budget and the actual. Here's the remaining, so it's calculating those. Same thing with unrestricted and so on and so forth. And so we have the ability on each one of these to expand or to shrink down. Let me go to another report right quick, and I'll show you some of the ways that we can do that just briefly. Here we go. So in this particular one, well, it's a similar, And so let me go back and we just go ahead and collapse it. So let's say we want to do away with the donor restrictions, and so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use these first 3 columns and edit them to make them more easy, take out the restriction issue. So it's just very simple thing to do. You can clear these out. And all of a sudden we have, now here I still have these columns, but we can remove those. But we took out the restriction issue here completely. We'll take just a little bit of time so you can see how easy it is to change these reports. Sometimes when people see the detail that's within the reports and so on and so forth, they look at them and they say, well, it must take a significant amount of coding or something like that to be able to do it. The fact is they're very simple to do. And now we no longer have the restrictions. We just have budget, actual, and how much is remaining. Now, if we want to go back in and we want to expand a particular area, we can do that. So let's say we were restricting in restrictions a moment ago. Let's go and let's do that. See if we can do that with grants. And we're going to do the same thing with the budget and the actual. And now it has pulled out all of our grants, and it's given us the budget and the actual for each one of them clear all the way across, and the total at the end. So the ability to change and edit your information, then you can save this report. If that's the format that you like, you can save that report for the future, but you can change it so easy. And again, then you still have all the abilities to drill down in any of these areas and see what information was part of that particular report. So I hope that gives you a general idea. We've got maybe some questions here today, so I'm going to stop right there. You've seen from beginning to end, you've seen the information that can be kept in Intacct concerning your grants. You've seen how to enter staff expenses, staff time, and actual bills, and then to invoice them to the particular grant, and then also how to do any reporting that you might do concerning the grant. So Megan, let's look at questions and see what we have.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So I'll read the first one out to you. Someone actually asked, how did the information for the expense report get into Intacct? Did it have to be added manually? We have Concur and it links to Intacct, but not in that level of detail.
Okay, in this particular example, it was manually entered, but there is the ability, and I would have to look at Concur. I'm not as familiar with Concur. But there are people at JMT, probably our consultants, that could answer that quicker for you. And if you want to send us that email, we'll find that answer. But it should be able to, if it's a marketplace. So the piece of the puzzle that's important here is if it's a marketplace partner with Sage Intacct, what that means is that an integration has been created for that and should be able to be set up. And if it's able to do that, then, and it may be that Concur has some limitations, I don't know, but if Concur has the detail and you have set up the details, so if, for example, if you set up the dimensions, the same as your dimensions in Intacct, you should be able to do that. And so I would just encourage you to, if you're one of our customers, encourage you to reach out to support and see if we can't help you with that and get that. But so there's two ways. One is manually. Well, there's three ways actually you can enter expenses or just about anything into Intacct. One is manually, and that's the way that was particularly done. I do not have any other software integrated into the demo version of it, but it's done, and it's done every day. So number one is manually, number two is an integration, and number three is an export-import process. And the export-import process, I don't have it set up for our demo today, but it's very simple to do. And it's use of to the glorious Excel spreadsheets again, but it's a very simple process. And so it may be that the solution that you're using outside of Intacct, that you can, that if it doesn't export, if it can export into Excel or CSV, then you can import it into Excel. And basically you set up a lookup sheet in Excel that you bring in your exported data from Concur or whoever it might be, have the lookup do the lookup, and prepares the import sheet to go directly back into Intacct. So it should be able to do it if it can integrate, number one. Number two, if not, we can export import it.
Great, thank you, Mark. And then another quick question that we had come in, this was a little bit earlier,
Okay.
thank you, when you were on the grants module, was wouldn't credit card expenses be recorded in AP?
Would credit card expenses be for the expenses? That's a good question. That's one I'll have to come back with. If I can get information, I can look that up. I'm not going to dig into it right now, but it. I don't know that it enters them directly. I think it has to be done if you're going to enter those from that side. Now you can. Let me back up another direction for you. Intacct now has the ability to do credit card feeds, just like bank feeds for reconciliation, and so. So you can export, import, and you can bring in so rather than bringing them in the expense side, you by a staff member, the other direction may be that you bring them in as an import from the credit card company, and then they're assigned to that. So if we need to ask more, if you need more information on that, let us know. But there are multiple. I think there are multiple ways to accomplish what you're trying to there. So.
Okay, great. And then we just had another question come in that says, can the grant application pull details from the employee expense journal?
Can the grant application, pull details from which?
From it says from the employee expense journal. I think that she said Intacct captures Concur details in the employee expense journal. So can the grant application pull details from that
Yes.
employee expense journal?
Yeah, for invoicing it does. Yes, and then it creates it in the record. Yes, if you have the project grant module and you mark that as billable, those credit card expenses, then it's going to automatically pull it into that grant. Yes.
Great, and so that's all the questions that we've had come in so far, but we did have some really good questions that just came in. So I want to give everyone another minute or two to ask any questions that they may have over any part of this webinar. And while we wait for those, I just want to let everyone know more about what the follow-up process is going to look like after this webinar. So I'll be reaching out to everyone through a phone call following today's webinar for just a more personalized discussion over your organization, your current grants tracking process and needs. If there's any questions that you had that you didn't get to ask on the webinar, you feel free to ask it then. We can go over it. And so be looking out for a phone call from me this afternoon, and then we can move into a more in-depth discovery of your needs if we need to after that. So, Mark, I don't think any more questions have come in, have there?
I haven't seen any more, no.
Yeah, great. Well, like I said, if there's any additional questions that anyone has, feel free to ask that on that follow-up. I should be getting to a good number of those this afternoon, so be looking out for a phone call from me then. But if not, then tomorrow morning you should get a phone call from me, and we can talk more about your thoughts as well as any additional questions that you might have had after this webinar. Before we do close out today, I do want to tell you that we have another webinar coming up on September 22nd over 5 principles of effective strategic planning. I would definitely recommend getting signed up for that one as well. It is completely free, like all of our webinars, and you can register on our website at jmtconsulting.com. And that's all I have today. Mark, is there anything you want to add before we close out?
No, I'm good. Just understand that JMT is not a software publisher. We are consulting, and what that means for you, the customer, is our number one goal is to make sure that your systems are working for what you need to do, not necessarily what the software wants to do. And so we'll be glad to work with you on any of those things.
Yeah, well, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day and great rest of the week. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.